This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
We got a real doozy to talk about this episode of the show in just a second. The Globe and Mail's Carrie Tate with a story, her exclusive, dropped just a number of days ago that's been grabbing everybody's attention, some invoking the name of Alison Redford. Could the province of Alberta, could Alberta's Conservative government be weathering its biggest scandal since the former Premier, Alison Redford, was cooking flight manifests, making plans for that Sky Palace, that personal residence for the Premier. This one around alleged cronyism, alleged favors to friends of the government, getting into health contracts, and of course the firing of an Alberta Health Services CEO. We're going to talk to Carrie Tate in just a second. We'll be looking to our Real Talk live chat to see where Real Talkers are on this. It was on your radar in our most recent episode, if you caught the flamethrower, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Albertans saying this isn't the type of thing we'll stand for. The Premier says she's not standing for it either. She says she has nothing to do with it. She says she wants a full report on her desk, and then she'll decide what to do with it. She says any suggestions that she had anything to do with any of the alleged corruption is defamatory. That's not insignificant either. When a political leader starts using that word, well, they're trying to do one of two things: either influence people off the story or indicate that they're more than prepared to sue. You remember Edmonton's Mayor Amarjeet Sohi suing a couple private citizens with a YouTube channel, alleging that he was up to some nefarious and sort of nepotism-driven contracts, right? Well, they're going to court. Could Alberta's Premier as well, if this continues? We'll get into all of this in just a second. First, I want to let you know this episode of Real Talk happens with the support of Alberta's top online real estate school. You can find them at Relo. That's RELO.ca, where you can learn more about their real estate course bundles. Whether you're considering a career in residential or commercial real estate, or heck, maybe both, you're going to want to go check out these popular and convenient courses that'll get you leveled up with the fundamentals and the practice of real estate, both residential and commercial real estate. You'll save by bundling both of these courses as well as their exam prep materials into one easy package. Relo makes it easy for you to get studied up for that exam, to get licensed to practice, and then get your career rolling. They've got expert instructors available around the clock for advice and exam prep. And of course, because you're hearing about this on Real Talk, you can save yourself a couple of $100. The promo code Ryan100, all one word, will save $100 off both of those bundles, Alberta Residential, Alberta Commercial. That's Ryan100 when you get started today at Relo.ca. Well, you can read the story yourself. Everybody's talking about it at theglobeandmail.com. The province of Alberta, the United Conservative Government, ousting its AHS, Alberta Health Services CEO, Athana Mentzelopoulos, amid her probe into medical contracts. This, a document that has been put into the light by Carrie Tate, a journalist working out of Calgary. She's kind enough to join us now live on the show. Carrie, welcome back. Thanks for this. I'm sure that for you knew that as soon as you started talking about this, this was a story that was going to get everybody's attention. In theory, this could be something, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. Take us into the story. How did it first get on your radar?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, this story actually, it's not as though it just kind of popped up last week or the week before that. This story of the allegations of concern at AHS actually stretches back as far back as 2022 that we know of, tied to the deal to import children's medication from Turkey. And then it's tied into, I think, Ryan, we talked about this past summer, the man involved in that company giving luxury box seat tickets to members of this government, to cabinet ministers. And then for a long time, there's been this talk in medical circles and in political circles about how the chartered surgical facilities, those private places that we can receive public health care operations paid for by the government, that some of those contracts were worth more than their competitors, that maybe they weren't all priced the same or within the same sphere. And that has been building and building. And then we saw at the beginning of January, the government dismissed the CEO of AHS, who had a 4-year contract. And then at the end of January, the board was dismissed. And through this, I think reporters have been hearing tidbits of people with concerns. And then the letter came out. The CEO had written a letter, or her lawyer, pardon me, had written a letter to AHS, basically part of her severance negotiation. She's saying, what you've offered me isn't good enough. And here are the problems why I think you fired me, because I was investigating things within AHS. So she details some of her investigatory findings in that letter, and that's sort of what's set off this firestorm.
So the Turkish Tylenol story has been on folks' radar for a while. There will be some questions around the private surgical facilities, and I want to get into with you some comments made by the former president of the Alberta Medical Association, Dr. Paul Parks, about some of the billing practices that are happening there with the private surgical facilities. But what's probably making the biggest news right now is something that the government itself, including the health minister, is saying, well, this is just kind of business. This is just how it goes, and that was the timing of the CEO's dismissal just a couple of days before she was scheduled to meet with Alberta's Auditor-General to discuss this report that she had ordered.
Right. So in her letter, she notes that the Auditor-General was informed of her investigations. There's a few investigations that she had launched, but she was 2 days away from meeting with him, according to her letter, and was fired. She had said that she was fired, the government not using quite that language. What she notes is that her contract was 4 years, and and she'd only completed 1 year of it. And the government's, sort of making an argument that this was part of a natural transition, that as they stand up their 4 new versions of AHS, the 4 components that make up one. So that's where all the allegations were contained in this letter, disputing that. And of course, noting that she was 2 days away from meeting with the Auditor-General to go over her findings is something that's quite explosive. The letter also notes that in December, the AHS board had recommended to her that she take her investigatory findings to the RCMP.
That's big, right?
Hey.
I mean, like that's the type of thing that's going to raise the public's eyebrows, because I think that, there's stories land differently, in particular when it comes to public opinion. And obviously now pundits are checking in, and I mean, Don Braid has a column referencing your reporting and invoking Alison Redford's sort of embattled at the end of her tenure, and the plane and the Sky Palace and that sort of a thing. But I think generally speaking, members of the public have a lot on their plate. They have a lot in front of them from, soccer schedules and Super Bowl parties and everything at their own jobs. And so every single political story is not on their radar. But once certain details start to surface, in other words, once people start invoking the name of the RCMP, or talking about senior executives, health services CEOs being fired days before meeting with the Auditor-General, all of a sudden people's eyebrows are raising. A big part of that January 20th letter is the allegation that the former CEO was pressured by senior government officials, including the Premier's former Chief of Staff, Marshall Smith, to essentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you can take us into this, Carrie, sign off on approving chartered surgical facilities, in particular with the group, the Alberta Surgical Group. Can you explain to us where the issue is, or the details that letter contains?
During this stretch that the former CEO was there were multiple deals that, she argues that she was in charge of negotiating. One is an extension with the Alberta Surgical Group, which is based in Edmonton. It's existing. It is, to be clear, it is part of the public healthcare system. And then she was also to negotiate deals for new facilities in Red Deer and Lethbridge. And she alleges that Mr. Smith, who's not related to the Premier, and other government officials had been putting pressure on her to sort of rush those deals, get them signed. She details receiving phone calls. One of them she details was specific from Marshall Smith regarding Alberta Surgical Group. The other one was specific regarding the facilities in Calgary, Red Deer and Lethbridge. So, but now her discomfort with this was that, well, first of all, she was worried that, the Premier's office might be trying to influence or pressure decisions at AHS. And her second concern was she found the contracts, in her opinion, for Alberta Surgical Group were too pricey. It was unclear who of the ownership structure, and she was worried about not doing proper due diligence, especially when she alleged she had, a feeling that some of the proprietors might be connected to people in circles of political influence.
What do we know about this Mr. Mraish, this Sam Mraish? I'm of several thoughts on the luxury box thing. It's kind of interesting. BC's Premier David Eby, unless I'm missing coverage from the West Coast, doesn't seem to be facing any fire for his attendance at that same game. Two premiers were in the box. This was the playoff series between the Vancouver Canucks and the Edmonton Oilers. And there's been much scrutiny on the Alberta government, and in particular Premier Danielle Smith, for being in that box, probably and obviously largely in part due to the fact that the whole Turkish Tylenol issue, and it was a big issue, and it was a debacle. It was an issue for Albertans, and it cost Albertans tens of millions of dollars. The government ultimately unable, for all intents and purposes, to deliver on that pain medication. But there's been no problem for David Eby being in there. Is it purely because of the procurement of those masks and that Tylenol? What do we know about the company? Is there more to this?
On the I just want to put a little asterisk. I'm sorry to jump in on that.
No, we want you to do that.
The Vancouver game, Alberta, after the Globe and Mail reported that from a source that those tickets came from a man named Sam Jabara, and I may be pronouncing that name incorrectly, and I apologize. He has ties to Sam Mraish, and Sam Mraish was in the photograph, the newspaper photograph. But those tickets may be related to Mr. Mraish, but they came from somebody tied to Invest Alberta.
Okay.
Is through. So sorry, little asterisk, but
but Carrie, that's why you're here. It's an important distinction.
Why there is this larger fuss in Alberta is that it wasn't, just one game, and that Vancouver game is the photo that always shows up because the photo exists. And it's a newspaper, it wasn't like somebody was trying to catch them in a box. It was a CP photo. But where it became problematic is that there's reporting from the Globe and Mail and others that shows that the Premier's office was attending multiple games in Edmonton, not just last year, the year before that. Cabinet ministers were going, and then it becomes a question of improper influence. Are you accepting gifts that pose a potential for conflict of interest? Now, when that story came out in July, it was right before the Jasper fires, and that story kind of got snuffed out. People were willing to, get through with what was publicly reported and move on. But now this is bringing in allegations that question whether or not some people were receiving or that the government was working on behalf of some private companies. And then that puts all of that in a different light.
I mean, documents do show, just for people's reference, and that's not to suggest that some of the stuff wasn't delivered on or that this is a scandal-ridden number. But, I mean, if you're talking about this company, MH Care, documents show that they provided more than $600 million worth of supplies and services for Alberta Health Services. So it is a significant relationship. So there's no wonder people are asking questions around it.
And so on that $600 million, that came from the former CEO's internal investigation. And that number's contained in her letter. One of the things she found relative specific to that was that the fellow who worked at AHS, who was in charge of procurement, had at times, and during the negotiation of the Tylenol deal, had an email account with MH Care. That's according to the former CEO. The former CEO also alleges that that person, while Alberta Health Services and Alberta Health were negotiating the chartered surgical facility contracts, that person may have been engaged or otherwise retained by companies tied to those or other procurement deals. And so that is what has made her allegations, I think, resonate with people differently than what happened when the story about the hockey tickets first emerged.
The Premier issuing a statement on X, formerly known as Twitter, not doing her radio show this weekend. I'm not sure if this is exactly why. Could be why. Maybe not. Maybe another reason. But she did issue a statement. I'll read it in part. Quote, says the Premier, I have read various media stories containing allegations regarding the procurement and contracting processes of AHS. Their troubling allegations should be reviewed as quickly as possible. Premier says she'll be writing the Auditor-General to ask for an expedited review. Says I've directed my officials to ensure any request for information from the Auditor-General is dealt with on a transparent and expedited basis. Says we need to get to the bottom of this issue quickly. She's asking that an internal review of AHS be completed as quickly as possible. Says she wants it delivered directly to her so she can study the results and make improvements. Says until the findings are delivered, AHS has paused contracting for surgical facilities under review. Here it is, quote, as Premier, I was not involved in any wrongdoing. Any insinuation to the contrary is false, baseless, and defamatory. You don't see a statement like that every day from a Premier.
Yeah. There's a few things in that statement. It's unclear whether, she does not say I didn't know about the allegations. The former CEO in her letter alleges that she had informed top people in the Premier's office of her findings, of her investigations. The health minister, she alleges, was also involved. AHS now no longer has a board. It is simply all under the control of the Deputy Minister of Health. So AHS may be doing its own investigation, but part of the difference between her statement and the Auditor-General statement is the Auditor-General says he's investigating AHS and Alberta Health. The Premier's statement does not address whether or not she'll look into procurement at Alberta Health. And that's one of a really nuanced thing within the former CEO's letter is that part of what her allegations hinge on is that it was Alberta Health that was also putting forward procurement contracts that she wasn't comfortable with.
How unusual is it to have a deputy minister in charge of the health authority? Like it's obviously, you have to assume not a long-term solution, of course. Relatively unusual for the average Albertan that's wondering how the health service is functioning right now. I mean, what would be your observation?
It's so hard to say whether that's unusual. What's unusual is just in general what this government has done. It has twice fired the entire board of AHS. It installed an official administrator, Dr. Cowell, replaced him with the former CEO, terminated her, and replaced her with the Deputy Minister of Health. And the former CEO, and excuse me, I keep calling her that because I can't pronounce her last name.
I'm doing my best. I think it's Mensalopoulos.
So she also alleges that he was informed of her investigations. In fact, he was a board member prior to this dust-up. He was one of the government's people on the board. And so these allegations, this information is not or should not be new to him. She alleges she briefed him on it, and he then briefed the health minister.
I know you don't prefer to talk opinion, and that's not your job. You're a journalist, and you're reporting on this story. But I'm just curious for your reaction to this. Don Braid is again in the Calgary Herald referencing your reporting. We're talking to Carrie Tate, who has this exclusive in the Globe and Mail. You can read it at theglobeandmail.com. Braid's essentially invoking Alison Redford, like 2012, that era anyway. The Sky Palace, the flights, talking about sort of one of the more prominent political scandals in Alberta history. Where do you rank this if all of this proves to be true? Is this? I mean, that's what brought Alison Redford's government down. Could we be talking about something with as serious of an impact in this case?
I'm very reluctant to rank something like that, and it's really hard to predict how this ends. Danielle Smith's and her government have been very successful at surviving things that would significantly dent previous governments. It's really hard to tell. And especially as you talked about earlier in the show, that there's so much going on right now that people's focus is difficult. One of the things, Alison Redford she didn't have the same connection with people that Premier Smith has. And I think that goes a long way with Premier Smith, that she has a network across the province. There's people who rally behind her and adore her, and Premier Redford did not have that same level of support. One of the differences in this, though, is that was right on Alison Redford. It was Alison Redford did this. These allegations are not Danielle Smith did this. It is her government. It's people within her office. The opposition leader argues she ought to have known, and if she didn't know, that makes her incompetent. But there's room where you can see where people would be forgiving to Premier Smith. If they're forgiving of the whole government, that's another question. Or forgiving of perhaps the health minister, we don't know. But comparing one against the other, especially how dramatically our politics and the way that we react to our politics has changed, I think is really difficult.
Yeah, fair to say, and quite frankly, the story hasn't played out yet, so nobody knows.
No.
Where does it go from here? I mean, Menthalopoulos, the former CEO, is suing the government, right? She wants $1.7 million, which would represent the fulfillment of her contract.
She hasn't launched a lawsuit. This is a letter saying this was like her severance negotiation but it does say, I'm prepared to sue for wrongful dismissal. So it's kind of like a warning letter.
Yeah.
I think one of the next big developments will be this week. There's a cabinet meeting tomorrow. And how the ministers deal with this amongst themselves and what they decide to do and how they come out of this is going to be really significant. Eventually, the health minister and the premier and perhaps others, one would think that they will or should face questions from the media, but there's no plans for that. But this does seem to be one that they can't just ride out. It hasn't gone away yet, and I don't think it's going away soon.
That's Carrie Tate from the Globe and Mail. It's her story, an exclusive. You can read it at theglobeandmail.com. Alberta ousted Health Services CEO amid probe into medical contracts, document alleges. Thanks for bringing us up to speed, Carrie, on this story, and good work on the continued reporting on this.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. I want to get to our Real Talk live chat powered by Park Power in just a quick second. Like, we're getting different perspectives on this. There are Smith supporters in the chat that are basically saying this is much ado about nothing. There are people that are saying Danielle Smith needs to resign right now. I saw Les in there. Thanks for $5 on the super chat. Les basically says, Danielle Smith and the UCP government needs to go for their walk in the snow type idea. Time to resign. Well, I guarantee that's probably not happening in the next few days. But I do think that the premier's into one right now, and people are demanding answers. The question is, ultimately, this mean not just for Albertans' confidence in the government? What does this mean for Albertans' confidence in how its health care system is operating as well? And if there's rot, nepotism, if there's scandal that is directing some of the major and extremely expensive decisions with Alberta Health Services, then obviously people want to know. And at the end of the day, people are going to know. I want to get into some of the response on this, my personal thoughts. I want to get into the live chat. Want to get to what Naheed Nenshi, official opposition leader, well, technically Alberta NDP leader. He'll be opposition when he gets his seat. But Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi, what he's saying about this. Plus, we haven't even talked about the Super Bowl yet. We haven't even talked about Donald Trump talking about tariffs on Air Force One on his way to the big game. A lot of ground to cover. First, I want to put this on your radar, though, real talkers. When events beyond our borders put Canada's economy in jeopardy, we've got to make the right choices here at home, like investing in world-class research and learning that fuels Alberta's prosperity. We can't afford to underfund academic staff at the University of Alberta because we can't afford to lose the teachers, researchers, and students that we need to power Alberta's future. I want to invite you to go to supportthespark.ca and help keep our future strong. This is a message from the Association of Academic Staff at the University of Alberta. So nice to run into the team at California Closets over the weekend watching the big football game. California Closets, an incredible locally owned company that is employing local folks using Canadian manufactured materials and doing incredible installations across the province and beyond. California Closets is proudly Alberta owned, and they're keeping the economic engine running. When it comes to home decor installations and designs, custom designs that help you make the most of your organizational systems, whether it's the bedroom, whether it's the home office, whether it's the boot room, the laundry room, or the garage, nobody does it better than the locally owned team at California Closets of Canada. It all starts with a free design consultation. You can book that today at californiaclosets.ca. And I want to make sure that you have a comedy show on your calendar in the month of March, so we're giving you plenty of advance notice. You know how excited we are, how proud we are to be partnering with the team at UCAN Youth Services. They're doing an amazing job as a nonprofit out of Alberta's capital city, dedicated to helping young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. They do it a bunch of different ways. You can check out their programs. Maybe consider making a donation or forging a relationship on their website. That's ucan.ca. But check out the Comedy Nights link coming up in March from the 10th to the 12th, and then the 17th to the 19th. Stand-up comedy nights. Going to be an absolute blast, all in support of UCAN Youth Services. The night of the 17th, we have a live auction item up for grabs. I'm going to be hosting a long lunch, and I'd love to see who's going to win that one. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. That's up for auction on the 17th of March. One of the UCAN Comedy Nights. You can learn more at ucancomedy.com. So a wild story, and this is one of the top stories in the province of Alberta right now, which is saying a lot because there's a lot to focus on, and we're grateful to have you here with us, Real Talkers, as we take a look at the top stories making news, and this one's a doozy for sure. The word scandal is being invoked here, and it could potentially be one. The sudden firing of the Alberta Health Services CEO. You already know this, and a lot of people, as we can see in the live chat right now, believe that this stinks to high heaven, right? I mean, here, essentially, as Carrie Tate just summed it up, Athena Mentzelopoulos unceremoniously booted from her role as she's digging in to some questionable contracts involving private healthcare providers. So these are ones that some are alleging could be inflated in cost. Like, John, one of the things I know that's grabbing people's attention is they're saying in these surgical facilities, they automatically bill for like a 2-night stay post-surgery. So you get your hip done, you get your knee done. It would be like a 2-night stay, and that's what they would automatically bill for. But people are alleging that, as an example, a lot of these are day patients. They're day surgeries. Yeah. The folks are walking out or wheeling out of the surgical facility the same day, but the facilities are still charging for the 2-night stay. That's one example when we talk about questionable billing, alleged questionable billing. That's one of the things we're talking about. Potentially shady in how the contracts were awarded. If there was a relationship that was not above board, that was too friendly, maybe single source contract type ideas, and of course potentially linked to political friends of the UCP government. This is the type of thing that pisses off the general public, right? But is it the type of thing that can move a government out. Who knows? If everything that's alleged is proven to be true, this would probably be one of the biggest scandals that we've seen in Alberta in decades. Now, the official line from the government, as we told you, and the statement from Danielle Smith over the weekend is that this was all part of a pre-planned transition. The health minister, Adriana LaGrange, says the firing of the CEO was nothing out of the ordinary. It was a matter of timing and getting our beans in a row and getting everything all figured out with this restructuring. Says it has nothing to do with her meeting with the Auditor-General. It has nothing to do with her ordering this investigation into these allegations. But, I mean, days away from meeting with the Auditor-General, days away, and then poof, she's gone. It just, of course, you can understand why some people believe that something's up here, right? It looks like somebody making sure that a certain conversation would never happen, right? And don't forget who we're talking about here. I know that people don't know a lot about Ms. Mentzelopoulos, but she's not a rookie bureaucrat. She's been around. She's worked under multiple conservative governments at both the provincial and federal level. She knows how the game is played. But she gets axed right at the time that she's looking into dodgy contracts. If even she wasn't safe, you have to ask yourself how deep this may go. And that's what she was trying to find out, right? So the NDP is calling for an RCMP investigation. Now, the job of official opposition is to hold a government to account, but there's also political opportunism here as well. So the moment that you invoke the name of the RCMP, as mentioned with Carrie, it's going to grab everybody's attention, and the NDP is probably right to do so. Because if the allegations are even half true, it would mean that public money, this is what's being alleged, public money is being funneled into private pockets in ways that are not above board, plainly put. And we've seen versions of this story before, which I think is why pundits like Don Braid are writing about Alison Redford. This whole Sky Palace scandal comes to mind. But this might be worse. How could this be worse? Well, because we're not just talking about government treating taxpayer dollars like it's their personal piggy bank. That's what pissed everybody off about Alison Redford and the Sky Palace, was it was intended to be a personal residence. It's what people were upset about the flight manifest. You remember that? Remember when the flights that the Premier Redford was taking with her daughter and her daughter's friend. I don't have a problem, by the way, with the daughter and the daughter's friend, but I digress. It was the lying. It was the fact that members of Redford's cabinet were listed to be on those flights to make it look like they were government flights, like they were business flights, when in fact those cabinet ministers or people tied to the Premier whose names were on the flight manifest were not actually on the flights. So it was public dollars for personal gain, for personal convenience, for personal benefit. And I don't have to tell you how that wound up for Alison Redford. But in this situation, this scenario, the allegations go deeper. You're talking about the fundamental integrity of Alberta's healthcare system. And so, Smith and her team, if you think about it, they've spent the last year quite effectively, as a matter of fact, aiming their guns at Ottawa, talking about transparency and talking about accountability when it comes to things like equalization and energy policy. I mean, within the last couple of weeks. But then when it's their own government under scrutiny, the United Conservative government in Alberta, suddenly, there's deflection. Suddenly, all of a sudden, everybody's gone shields up, right? So this is the same Premier who is already alleged attempted to interfere in the justice system, trying to meddle in prosecutors' decisions on COVID cases, although even that was mired in the muck. You remember the CBC issuing that apology, that retraction for reporting that Smith herself had reached out to Crown prosecutors. Do you remember that story? She's admitted to talking to Artur Pawlowski, that ridiculous street preacher down in Calgary, about his criminal case. So it wouldn't be the first time that the Premier, this is not the first time that the Premier's being accused of blurring the lines between political power and proper process. And her government is essentially, by way of the health minister, trying to convince Albertans that it's a coincidence that the Alberta Health Services CEO, who was investigating potential corruption in contracts, was fired right before she could meet with the watchdog. It's possible that it's a coincidence, but it's maybe not probable. You know the difference? It's possible, but maybe not probable. So here's what Don Braid has to say about this. And this guy's easily one of the most seasoned political commentators in the country, for sure in Alberta. And he's calling this one of the worst scandals since Redford. He's not known for hyperbole. And quite frankly, recently he's not been particularly hard on the Conservative government. So here we are. Braid quotes NDP leader Naheed Nenshi, says it took her 4 days to say anything, says Nenshi. And then she says she'll do nothing beyond what's already happening, expecting this report on her desk. Nenshi says this is simply not good enough. Her own office is implicated. The investigation cannot be handed over to the people being investigated. Asks Nenshi, how dumb does Danielle Smith think Albertans are? Pretty big deal. Don Braid also quotes Paul Parks, who you've heard here on the show before, and he says basically that Albertans deserve a wider inquiry into this. He says because you've heard Paul, remember that he was the president of the Alberta Medical Association up until recently. He's been on this show several times. Says that Albertans deserve a wider inquiry into this because the government's placed a tight lid on AHS in the healthcare system. Says the government is controlling every breath that's drawn at AHS, and the fear of disclosing problems spreads deep into the entire system. So a culture issue. An issue or a circumstance, a scenario where potential whistleblowers feel intimidated, feel that they're not going to stick their necks out and speak out. Paul Parks says, basically, I know that if they come after me because of what I say, I'm toast in this province, blacklisted. So that's the culture. A couple of years ago, in 2022, Dr. Verna Yu, remember her? She was canned because the government didn't like her COVID-19 performance. Dr. Dina Hinshaw, remember that? Chief Medical Officer of Health through COVID, not only dismissed under the new government, but then later denied a job that she had been offered in a smaller part of the system. A lot of people figured that there was some personal stuff happening there, that there was a bit of a grudge, a bit of an axe that was continuing to be ground there. And so right now, if you're an Albertan, you're kind of wondering what happens next. And obviously, nobody knows at this point, but if this government is serious about proving its innocence, and that's got to be a motivating factor for any premier that wants the staying power that Danielle Smith wants. And Carrie Tate is absolutely right in pointing out Smith's popularity right now. That's something she'll want to leverage, but this government should welcome an independent investigation. That's a no-brainer, right? They should turn over every email, every memo, every contract. And quite frankly, if the premier and the health minister, LaGrange, or anybody in their orbit was involved in political interference to protect friends or donors, then there's only one choice, and that choice would be to resign. Albertans have every right to demand answers. This is a story that they'll be watching across the country because if your healthcare system is being carved up and handed out as political favors, it's not just corruption, it's a betrayal. You can't mess with the healthcare system. People view it differently than anything else. So this government's got a lot on its record. It's navigated allegations of corruption and scandal before. This one, if you're paying closer attention to this than any other story in recent memory, you would be right to do so because the allegations and the stakes are huge. On the Real Talk live chat, powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider, Bunny Slippers says this is just beyond. I mean, how much money are we allegedly talking about? And that's a question that nobody can really answer, but the perspective there of the relationship, and nobody's saying that there hasn't been delivery on some of these supplies and services. You're talking about $600+ million. Now, the Turkish Tylenol one is the big one because obviously there wasn't delivery. I mean, the lion's share of it was not utilized at all. It was unable to be utilized in the application that was expected, which was with young kids. Experts basically, once they had a look at it, were saying that it actually could be dangerous for young kids. They tried to push it out through clinics and in hospitals, and ultimately at the end of the day, it wound up being a debacle. I know that some people have given the government a pass on that one, have said, listen, they were trying to do everything they could do at a time when it was, supports like children's medication were desperately needed, and there was a shortage across the country. The government did what it tried to do, and it didn't work out, and, well, they did their best. And others are saying that's $70 million. the critics of it would say on some scheme that was destined to fail. What are you talking about? We always try to ask on this show, what would you do if it was the other political party? What would you do if it was the other political leader?
Well, that's what I'm just thinking as you're saying this. Danielle Smith, our premier, is one who's always talking about being fiscally responsible and the wastage of money from the Liberal Party in Ottawa. So that's particularly damning. But, I mean, the whole weekend we've been talking about this, Ryan, and watching online. There's really no way to paint this in any sort of positive light. I mean, the 3 days waiting to comment on it was sketchy at best. Another thing is, we have the receipts, Ryan. We have clips of Danielle Smith talking about how she's against dollars pushing policy just within last year, near the end of the year. And then this comes out. And then, not going on her radio show this weekend, you can come up with excuses for that as well. But this is all bad. This is, I don't want to say a gotcha moment, but this is the deepest mud our premier's been in, I think.
Yeah. Sylvie in the live chat says when you centralize power in your office, then you're the one that has to be held responsible. There's no wiggling out of that. Whiterium says Don Braid not known for his hyperbole. Good one, Ryan. Good one, Ryan. I'm just saying, Don Braid is not like a clickbait guy. Don Braid is a respected commentator, and I just once you start comparing, Carrie Tate didn't want to do it. She didn't want to compare this to Alison Redford, probably too soon. But when you go there, I'm just saying, you can only make those comparisons so many times before people stop reading your columns, before people start tuning you out. And his gut, based on however many years covering politics, 40 years probably, is that this is in that same conversation. And if that is the case, then you're talking about something that could bring down a government, that could force a premier to resign, if it proves to be true. That's all I'm saying. Bunny Slipper says there's no such things, Ryan, as coincidences when it comes to scandals. Meatball Auditor says Nenshi, the professional finger pointer, the professional blame shifter. This is pathetic politics. I don't know if you can. I mean, I understand if you're not the biggest fan of Naheed Nenshi, that's fine. If you'd never vote for Naheed Nenshi, that's fine. I don't know if it's pathetic politics. If it's alleged that Albertans are being taken advantage of here, and that millions and millions of dollars are being funneled somewhere they shouldn't be funneled, and that the health system is not benefiting from the expenditures, then this is absolutely 100%, without a doubt, the type of thing that needs to be examined all the way to the bottom and then all the way back up to the top. That really has nothing to do with Naheed Nenshi, but this is an opportunity for the NDP like it hasn't had in quite some time. Mm-hmm. Michelle says the cover-up has started already. Smith is sunk. I don't know. Carrie's right as well, though. She is like the people's premier, right? There's a thing. I saw some people here. I think it was Dwayne, somebody in our live chat, saying Ralph Klein had stuff like this, would have these sort of like inconvenient issues,
different time,
stories like this, allegations like this. But there was something about Ralph Klein that kind of allowed him to operate up until he couldn't, when he lost the support of his own party, when it was time for him to go. But Smith does have an ability that a less likable premier does not have, and that is to keep pushing forward, keep eyes on the prize, keep her supporters backing her big time, like a lot of them are in the chat right now.
Well, they're backing her online too. You see photos going up on X this weekend. I see, I still support the premier. It's the breadcrumbs though, Ryan. I mean, you start with the Turkish Tylenol. Okay, mistake. You were trying to get medication into us during a crazy time. We'll let that one go. But then, the hockey tickets. Okay, maybe it's just a coincidence. But then, the firing of the CEO just before she's about to put out or look into things. And then, like I said, the silence for 3 days, the missing the radio show. This isn't commonly what the premier does. She attacks things immediately. So for her to be quiet for 3 days, we immediately knew this is very bad. And I agree with you. I think this is, if there are breadcrumbs that lead back to her specifically on this, or even just the party, I think there's a chance she could resign. Yeah.
I don't know. If I was a betting man,
I mean, I know she's not going to.
By the way, I made one of the worst bets of my life last night. You and I will talk about that in a second. But if I was a betting man, my bet is that she's not going to resign, not even close to resign. I can't guarantee anything, but I don't think that's on her radar. But I do think that her team is having to come up with a way to weather this storm, because this isn't the type of story that will go away.
No.
Some politically inconvenient stories will just go away. I don't think this one goes away, right? So, Dwayne says, I remember when the Alberta PCs were responsible for so many costly debacles for decades. He says pretty much ever since Peter Naheed, since he was no longer, he says, Albertans didn't learn and they've got more of the same. Jillian says, I'll never forget the Conservatives, or forgive them rather, for destroying the WE charity in Canada, going federal now, she says, and all the opportunities it provided youth just to try to give Justin Trudeau a black eye. She says Canada is now the only country without the WE charity. Kind of interesting to see what Elon Musk is doing with USAID down in the South. Super Chat Ken says this is serious enough to justify a public inquiry by an independent judge, not a review by the Auditor-General or an AHS review that will be returned directly back to the Premier. These are both groups, the Auditor-General, which is true. He says the Auditor-General or Alberta Health Services, any sort of a board, both groups that could be fired. And that is true. I don't know that people are okay with the report being returned to the Premier. But then Justin in the chat is quite right, who says, an RCMP investigation, perfect. We should find out the results of that in 5 years or so.
He's not wrong.
No offense to the men and women that are serving on the front lines with the RCMP, and especially in rural communities across the province, but I think Justin might be referencing the alleged scandal around the UCP leadership involving Jason Kenney, Jeff Callaway, the kamikaze candidate, Brian Jean. You remember that? The RCMP investigation into that stretched on and on and on, and then the RCMP ultimately ruling that really there was nothing and no reason for any further charges. So, but that took a long time. You can let us know. Seventh Pilot is wondering how my Senate appointment from Justin Trudeau is looking. Good. Seventh Pilot, I appreciate you checking in. I was actually talking to it was when Justin Trudeau popped by the other day to drop off our check for the media subsidy.
Our monthly
for our monthly check, and he popped in and we asked him. I asked him about my Senate appointment, and Johnny, you have a really neat opportunity coming up as well, a government appointment as well.
Yeah,
and I just sort of asked
Ryan's chief of staff
what the delay was with that, and he said, just keep attacking conservatives, and ultimately you'll find yourself in the red chamber. So Seventh Pilot, I appreciate you asking and checking in. Mark says. Basically, he's looking out for landowner compensation in this, says any healthcare scandal is peanuts compared to this government's plans to have you pay landowner compensation for oil and gas companies. Ken says if this scandal doesn't bother you, you might identify yourself by politics, as I'm lucky to not have that affiliation. Newcomb Wige says her team, what about Albertans? Says the people, we deserve honest answers. She is accountable. The Premier is to the people of Alberta. 100% correct. 100% right. So you can let us know what you think about this talk at RyanJespersen.com. I know for some of you, especially those of you that are working in healthcare, you may echo the sentiments of what Dr. Paul Parks said, concerns around being blacklisted. If you want, you can always send us a letter requesting anonymity. We appreciate that if you do, in confidence, in trust, that you provide some form of proof that you are who you say you are. We want to put credible information in front of this audience, in particular on stories like this that resonate deeply, that hit people where it matters. Sometimes the rumor mill stories are a little bit more fun. They're a little bit more on the surface. There's less at stake. This is indicating or alleging some pretty deep rot and some pretty wild stuff. And so you can send us an email anytime to talk at RyanJespersen.com. And, of course, I want to let you know as well that you can also submit ahead of time to the Flamethrower. This is our tradition every single week presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. If you've got stuff you got to get off your chest, if you've got a hot take that you think that Albertans, that Canadians need to hear, you know where to send it. That's talk at RyanJespersen.com. And just clearly note the Flamethrower in the subject line of that email. Want to get to what other premiers are saying. Doug Ford had some strong words for the federal government, for Justin Trudeau and his government, as Donald Trump is doubling down on the tariff threat. This kind of seemed like a little bit out of nowhere. On Air Force One, on his way from Florida to New Orleans to watch the Super Bowl, the president rekindles talk of tariffs. Whatever happened to this 1 month off? Whatever happened to the 1 month pause on tariffs. Trump says that early this week, it's going to be steel and aluminum in the crosshairs. We'll get to that story in just a quick second. First, I want to let you know that Athabasca University is ready around the clock, 24 hours a day, 12 months a year, to answer your questions on what a post-secondary journey at AU could look like. World-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. That means you don't have to wait till September, or you didn't miss the boat in January by not kick-starting your studies, whether that's maybe some sort of certification, whether it's an undergraduate degree, maybe a grad degree, maybe an MBA, whatever it is. You are custom designing the pace of your studies, your path, and whatever works best for you. Choose the online learning path that works for you on their website, athabascau.ca, and learn more about online professional development, online graduate programs, undergraduate programs, and more at Athabasca University. Again, they're online at athabascau.ca. Our friends at Friesen Brothers are proudly Alberta-grown and Alberta-owned, have been since inception. And, of course, they're celebrating their 70th anniversary this year, 2025. What a remarkable 70 years it's been, and they're just getting started. Valentine's Day will be upon us. Before you know it, there's a big family day brunch coming up, and Friesen Brothers has you covered. Whatever you need, they've got you, and an amazing commitment to Heart Month as well through February. You can learn more details by checking out their website at friesen.com. At Complete Care Restoration, they know the toll that it can take when disaster strikes, whether it's in weather like we're experiencing right now, burst pipes, maybe a sewer backup. It could be fire, flood. Maybe you've discovered asbestos or black mold you weren't expecting on what was supposed to be a small home reno project. You don't want to leave this stuff, and you don't want to go at it alone. They've got a team, certified professionals that for more than a quarter century have been restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind. You can find Complete Care Restoration online at completecarerestoration.ca. They're ready to respond 24/7, and they'll work directly with your insurance company to take that off your plate. If disaster strikes, heaven forbid, remember Complete Care Restoration. What's that?
You did it again.
Oh, right when the music stopped. Yeah, we saw that coming. We take pleasure in the small things here. Unbelievable Super Bowl for reasons that I think a lot of people are going to maybe have a hard time coming to terms with, and that is that an absolute blowout that I don't know that anybody was expecting.
Unbelievable.
I was having an absolute blast with you and about 150 of our closest friends at
On
the Rocks.
Really fun, yeah.
Hosting the On the Rocks first ever, their inaugural Super Bowl party, and we're definitely going to do that again. I want to give a huge shout out to all the Real Talkers that showed up. We were having a ton of fun down there. Great food, great vibe, great atmosphere, but Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs just weren't able to show up, or at least not until it was too late.
Yeah, what happened?
And the Philadelphia Eagles just beating the tar out of these guys. Unbelievable. How are you? I mean, I know you came in there. You're a big Dolphins fan. You don't really care about the two teams.
I got no dog in this fight, man.
But it was just kind of, I think for football fans, this is the biggest sporting spectacle on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Nobody really got the game they were hoping for. People wanted to see these two juggernauts trade punches.
Of course, it's a letdown. I mean, you want a championship game no matter in which sport. Game 7, finals, game of the year, Super Bowl, whatever it is. To be close, or to at least be back and forth, or the best thing you want is a really tight game or a crazy comeback, and Mahomes is known for that. They've always been down by at least 10, going into the second quarter or the half, and he always pulls something out of his hat. Just didn't look organized last night, and I'm not even a huge football guy because obviously the Dolphins suck, so I haven't been watching for a couple seasons.
Injury problems.
But, you could just see it. Unorganized, Kelsey and him just not connecting. You could see it from one of the first catches he missed. Just, Kelsey slamming his helmet. Mahomes looking at him like, what the fuck? We've run this play a million times. You can't get your hands on the ball. And then in terms of production, you just noticed it in the Super Bowl more. Less celebrities on screen. Taylor Swift hardly shown at all, but how can you blame them? If Kelsey's not making catches, there's no reason to show Taylor Swift. But just the whole production of the game seemed a little, I'm not going to say lackluster. It's incredible the way you could see behind the commentators, what they're doing, how they're setting up things and changing so fast for halftime and all the other things. But just, not a lot of show. Like, I thought we would have seen drunk Kevin Hart on the screen like 100 times. I think I saw him like 3. But big shout out to him. He's been waiting for the Eagles to win forever. But just in general, I think we were talking about this at the game, just looking around at people, like a lot more chatting going on, not people kind of watching the game. And I know that happens a lot with Super Bowl because there's a lot of people who don't watch all year and they kind of, they watch the commercials and then they chat during the game if they're not really into football. But just in general, it was a lot of us coming together and hanging out because from the get-go, Ryan, this game was gone. Defensively, the Eagles were just dominating, and to have a Super Bowl go to 0 to that lopsided score to as long as it did, I was like, man, this has to be a record.
A couple of Hail Marys that they were able to convert and wind up the score looking a little bit less bad than the game really was. Yeah. But still an entertaining one. Always great to get people together.
It's the biggest show on earth.
Quite a halftime show by Kendrick Lamar. And a huge congrats to the Eagles and the city of Philadelphia. City of Philadelphia needs a championship every once in a while,
course,
so it doesn't implode.
And just an amazing team for the last 3 years. We've been saying this team should probably win a Super Bowl. And then, of course, President Trump attending. It's not often. I think he's the first president to ever go to the Super Bowl.
I saw them
forever.
saying that, but that doesn't make sense.
Maybe since it was actually we were talking about this last night how the Super Bowl became the Super Bowl it is today. But people talking about there were some boos when he was up there on the screen, and then they didn't. I thought they'd be showing Trump every 5 minutes, the president's at the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
We didn't get those shots. We did get this shot, of course, you thought was kind of entertaining. I mean, most
Trump
people
saluting.
Most people put their hand on their heart. But
I like it. I like the president.
A guy who kind of sidestepped, a service, giving a salute.
What you kind of expected like have his hand in his pocket, be chewing gum.
No, hand over the heart is kind of standard. But and then halftime show I thought was good. I always do. You've kind of got these people online that every time we see the halftime show it's kind of pop, it's kind of people's stance is worst show ever. Well, I don't know about worst show ever. You had Sam Jackson out there, a lot of hidden meanings and stuff about what's innate in America right now, what's going on with culture wars and race and stuff like that. So if you watch it back and listen a little closer, I think you might find some amazing meaning in it. Was it the greatest halftime show of the last 10 years? No. But what we are seeing...
That's subjective, though, right?
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing. Music is subjective. You had Serena Williams out there. She, of course, is from Compton. This was a big West Coast thing. If you don't know hip-hop, Kendrick Lamar repping the West Coast. New York and East Coast hip-hop has been dominant for a long time. It's kind of shifting back because of him. His feud with Drake also played into this. He mentioning Drake by name on stage during this was absolutely crazy. Doing the diss, which is basically A minor, and hearing the whole crowd scream it out. I mean, this beef is over. He has won. He won 2 Grammys for the song. He did the Super Bowl.
He won for now.
It's over. Drake should just make a song for the ladies and chill. I mean, he dominated hip hop for a decade. This is showing kind of a shifting of that dominance. So, but yeah, in general, I think, you watch what these guys do behind the scene, the production, it's absolutely incredible. To people say worst halftime show ever. Do you know how many hundreds of people you're talking to? You're not just talking to this one artist. You're talking to hundreds of people who dedicate months and months to this. So, and the numbers don't lie. I mean, people say, there hasn't been a good halftime show for 10 years. Well, the second and third most watched halftime shows were Usher and Rihanna, the last 2 halftime shows. We don't have numbers yet definitive on what Kendrick was, but and if you want to know, yes, number 1 still Michael Jackson, who was the guy who kind of before that it was like you'd have not NSYNC and Aerosmith, that was after him, but you'd have a compilation of people. You'd have like 5 different groups doing the halftime show. Michael Jackson was the one who really pushed the single artist narrative because he had 134 million or something like that viewers. Back then, this is before like HD TV and all that. People just watching on a square box. It was insane. But yeah, number 2 Usher, number 3 Rihanna, which were the last 2 Super Bowls. So we'll have to see. But
it was a spectacle for sure.
It's it's
Don,
great.
Don's watching us. He says, nice Buick Grand National on stage.
Yeah,
I
right?
couldn't stop that. That car was sick. Don, I'm with you. I agree. This is Tara Lynn, who joined us. By the way, Tara Lynn, was wonderful to see you there at On the Rocks. Thanks. She's in the live chat right now. She says the cost for Trump to be at the game was ridiculous, as the shot of him saluting was painful to watch, especially given his history with non-service. I don't know. Wise Kyle's in there as well, though, saying the president's the commander-in-chief. So, of course, he's going to salute. Donald Trump on Air Force One from Mar-a-Lago, from Florida to the game, to New Orleans, had this to say, and sort of like reigniting for those of you and the show, even this show. We didn't necessarily step off of the tariffs story, but it became less of a story in the sense that Canadian businesses and Canadian entrepreneurs believed that they had a month with the president pressing pause on threatened tariffs for Mexico and Canada, obviously. A month pause, saying we're going to reevaluate. We'll get everything sorted out. You believe that it would give federal governments. Mexico says that they're sending, 10,000 troops to the border. Canada spending about $1.3 billion in additional dollars on border security. I don't know if anybody believes that this is actually what any of this is about. Trump doubling down on the weekend, by the way, over his thoughts on Canada as the 51st state. Said that he's not joking. Says he's not trying to get a rise of people. Says it's absolutely serious. And on Air Force One, saying that whole 1 month pause on tariffs, maybe not actually.
I'll be announcing probably Tuesday or Wednesday at a news conference reciprocal tariffs, and very simply, it's if they charge us, we charge them. That's all.
When does it go into effect, sir?
Almost immediately, but I'll be announcing the details of it, highly detailed, and it'll be great for everybody, including the other countries. But if they are charging us 130% and we're charging them nothing, it's not going to stay that way.
This is on every country?
Every country will be reciprocal.
And just on the steel question, just so I understand.
We'll also be announcing steel tariffs on Monday.
On this tomorrow?
Monday, yeah, tomorrow.
What countries will those go on?
Everybody. Steel.
Including Canada, Mexico,
Yeah. Any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff.
What about aluminum, sir?
Aluminum too.
10%?
25%.
25 for aluminum.
25 for both.
So there you have it. Forget about the 1 month break. This will be imposed pretty much right away. I thought that it was kind of interesting that steel and aluminum are focused on. We had Curtis Herdlicka joining us on a Real Talk Roundtable just a couple of episodes ago, put it out 4 days ago. And he was here talking about, I actually love that roundtable. You had Lane Edwards talking about Pure Botanicals. They do like skincare products that are manufactured here, proudly Canadian owned, manufactured in Canada. You had Justine Barber talking about Poppy Barley, the women's footwear brand that's seen huge success over its 12 years in existence. They do a lot of work. A lot of their shoes are manufactured in Mexico. She gets into it in the episode and encourage you to check that out. But Curtis Herdlicka with Honomobo talking about, in particular, steel. He's talking about steel and glass and some of the tariffs and how that impacts these modular homes, these prefabricated homes that they're building, and a large number of homes that they were intending to be selling into the United States. And I think that they probably still are intending to sell into the United States down in the state of California for people that were impacted, the thousands and thousands of households that were impacted by those LA fires. You have to wonder now, and Curtis gets into it in the episode. I encourage you to check it out. Starts talking about what those implications could mean for their pricing, what the tariffs look like, and you recognize that these types of things are huge. These announcements from Donald Trump are huge when it comes to the ripple effect and what it'll do for Canadian business, Canadian consumers, and of course, at the end of the day, the relationship between Canada and the United States. If you missed that episode, I encourage you to check it out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. The question, how are you America-proofing your business? And regardless of what you do for work, if you own or operate a business in Canada, I think that there were some great insights there from those 3 different business owners on exactly what they're doing to keep their heads above water right now and to navigate these choppy waters under President Donald Trump. Pretty interesting note from Justine Barber on Poppy Barley talking about how they had locked in an exchange rate with some of their suppliers to make take some of the uncertainty there out of that trade relationship. But from Donald Trump, obviously this announcement a big deal, probably overshadowed by the Super Bowl, but even on the Rocks when we were watching the game together, people were talking about it. People were talking at the tables. I heard them. We interacted with some of them talking about, did you hear what Trump said on the plane? Did you hear what Trump said about tariffs? Everybody has it on their radar.
It's not boding well for Canadians, but good on Poppy Barley and how they're like, that's a great episode. Go back and watch it on just talking about people, how they're kind of seeing down the road and getting ahead of this. And wouldn't you know, they were right, because, when Trump says one thing, who knows what he means? He means another. 30 days turned into what? 3 days? 4 days? So, it was pretty. And ahead of the Super Bowl, he had to know it was going to blow up, ahead of the Super Bowl. He couldn't wait till Monday. That's kind of, But I don't think this is about border or fentanyl or any of that. I think it's about, I'll just say it. It's about fresh water. It's about our resources. It's about a ton of things we have in Canada that are in the ground or in the water and not being utilized because we have a smaller population than California. And I think that's his whole thing in his head is he wants our stuff, Ryan. I'm just going to say it. He wants our stuff.
He can't have it.
He wants it.
It's not for sale.
He wants it.
It's not for sale. But yeah, doubling down on his Canada's the 51st state thing, which I think is just wild, and it's getting to the point where you start pushing buttons, but how far can you push? Interesting to see Doug Ford responding to this, the Conservative Premier of Ontario. He wants to make sure, and keep in mind, Doug Ford, the way he's playing this, he's been talking a lot about maybe we should just turn off the power. Maybe we should turn off the taps. M8, can I see in our live chat saying that same thing? Maybe we should just turn off the power for the Super Bowl. But then at the same time, obviously advocating for sectors in Ontario that'll be affected by these tariffs. Auto manufacturers and the auto parts industry, obviously huge. Doug Ford putting pressure on the Liberal government, saying that Canada needs we're talking about now a fentanyl czar. This is one of the things that that Donald Trump says he wants Canada to take more seriously. Whether or not it's accurate that Canada is responsible for the lion's share of the Americans' fentanyl problems, that is not accurate, by the way. Doug Ford says it's time for our federal government to get more serious.
My question again to Prime Minister Trudeau, where is the fentanyl czar? It's been now 5 days, I believe, and time is running out. We can't be waiting till the last minute. Please appoint a fentanyl czar. Start showing the Americans what we are doing. Show the Trump administration that we have helicopters and fixed wing aircraft and boots on the ground and boats in the water and ATVs up and down. That's what Ontario is doing. But we need to see action from the federal government.
So there you have it, and they have their own theme music. Maybe we should have let the Ontario PC.
Sorry, I should have dipped out of that sooner. But
I like it, actually. A premier with his own theme music?
Oh, that's great. I got to get the Doug Ford soundtrack in my car so I can rip around. But yeah, it's great that he's being patriotic lately. I love the hats, Doug Ford. But again, I think that's time and work and money that isn't going to change Donald Trump's mind. You take all the fentanyl out of the border, he's gonna move the goalpost again, Ryan. I don't think it matters at all. That is not what Donald Trump is thinking about. He's thinking about, dissolving that border or at the very least, getting, a better deal. They already had an amazing trade deal, getting everything from us at a discount. He wants a bigger discount or he wants to come over here and have a piece of the resources. So yes, fentanyls are a great idea, but the amount of fentanyl, we talked about this on the show, is about the size of a bag of fertilizer going across the border a year. And I understand fentanyl, a grain of salt can kill somebody. I get it. But when you're talking about China with C canisters full, when you're talking about India with C canisters full, I mean, we are nothing in comparison to these countries.
The only thing is that's not the argument you can make. And I'm not saying that you're saying that it is, but when you're dealing with the United States, the world superpower, our most important trading partner,
you can't pass
and in
the buck.
particular Donald Trump, I don't think that you can reason I think
No, you can't.
and I know that
Agreed,
politicians have been
yeah.
trying to do it, but I don't think you can reason with him.
No.
In a way, you've got to find that fine line. You've got to find that balance between standing up for Canada, you can't waver on that, and giving him what he wants, or at least leading him to believe that you're giving him what he wants.
Well, you've got to give him some of what he wants, or it doesn't go away, right?
100%. Interesting polling, by the way, talking about who's negotiating for Canada or who might next be negotiating for Canada. Obviously, you know that the Liberal Party of Canada has a leadership contest underway. Whoever wins for a short period of time will be the next Prime Minister of Canada. They will likely call an election in short order, and then we'll see if Pierre Poilievre and his Conservatives can hold this lead that they've built in the polls for probably the better part of the last couple of years, or if the new Liberal leader will be able to save the party. It seemed unlikely. Many of you believe that it still probably is unlikely. I mean, you'd really have to pull off a miracle. You notice how we've glossed over and not talked about the fact that at the Super Bowl yesterday, some of the people sitting around our table got this harebrained scheme to bet on Mahomes at halftime to believe that he could pull off the comeback.
You followed along a bit there.
Well, yeah, I did follow along. I threw $100 into the pot. Probably the
Hey,
best.
it's fun.
Probably the stupidest bet I've ever made in my life. But I just thought if anybody
Well,
can come
no, I
back,
wouldn't
if
say
anybody can come back, it's Patrick Mahomes.
That's what
and
I was
the
going to
Chiefs.
say. It's not a stupid bet. It's happened.
So we made a big
multiple
bet
times.
because we were going to win a ton of money and basically buy rounds for the entire bar. And of course, as you know, that money evaporated.
Goodbye.
But who is going to be the Canadian politician, the federal politician who will be the prime minister, or the diplomats, the team that'll be able to throw that Hail Mary and land it? And Nanos has done some really interesting research. Nanos Research conducted for CTV News. This is out just a few days ago. Check this out. This is what Canadians are saying. Canadians that are polled. Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney would do the best job at negotiating with U.S. President Donald Trump over Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, as well as federal leadership candidates Chrystia Freeland and Karina Gould. This according to this new poll when asked which of the following politicians would do the best job at negotiating with American President Donald Trump. 2 out of 5, or 40% of respondents, answered Mark Carney. Pierre Poilievre was second on the list, with 26% of people surveyed saying that he would do the best job. To round it out, 13% of people said Freeland, 1% said Gould, 12% said they were unsure, and 9% said that they don't think it would make a difference. I can kind of relate to people that would believe that it doesn't matter who's doing the negotiating, but it's particularly interesting to see that 40% of people polled by Nanos Research believe that Mark Carney would do a better job. 26% believe Pierre Poilievre would. M. Aiken says Carney's blowing Poilievre out of the water. You have to wonder, is it possible that Mark Carney wins the Liberal leadership and is able in short order to effectively negotiate with Donald Trump, and then when he calls this federal election, which I expect would be quick, or maybe he wants a bit of runway, maybe he wants a few months, who knows? It'll be up to him, it'll be his prerogative. But does he have what it takes? Would an expedited, mutually beneficial agreement with the United States, with the possibility of a new refresh on that relationship between, the federal government in Canada and the Trump administration in that White House, could that save the federal Liberal government?
Well,
it's hard to imagine. I don't think anybody would have said so 2 months ago,
No.
but right now people are having a different conversation.
No, but number one, I think he will be the Liberal leader. Number two, the guy knows money. He's a banker. You hate saying that word. They're straying away from saying it, but maybe he can talk some sense into Trump and make dollars make him smile a little more. And you never know. We are seeing I check every day now because I'm like, oh, Carney's talking and Trump, everything going on. Little bump for the Liberals in the polls, which is a good thing, since the whole resignation of Trudeau and Carney coming out saying he's running for leader. But obviously, if we had an election today, it's still going to be a Conservative majority. But maybe it does work, Ryan. Two guys who know money sitting down at a table might work out a little better than someone like Pierre Poilievre, who, he said a lot of things about the economy and everything, but I haven't seen any numbers from Pierre.
Yeah, I mean, I just I find it. I wouldn't have said that I think that this government could save its bacon. Just, I mean, you look at that polling and it just was not friendly to the Liberals, to say the least. Like, the Prime Minister's popularity in particular is an absolute disaster. But by stepping down, and even a lot of people, Liberal supporters, even people that we talked to on this show, saying that it was too late. Trudeau needed to resign in the fall. It was too late. It's too late to save it. It doesn't matter who comes in. This is a government that could be looking. People were talking about 12 seats, 18 seats, 20 seats federally. Like basically, the equivalent of coming in and just wiping the government off the table. The tablecloth, the glasses shattering, the plates shattering, a complete overhaul. And that could still be the case. I mean, a lot of you right now are making very good and fair points about polling. You don't believe the polls. You don't buy too much into polling. And if history is our greatest teacher, we would be wise to be cynical about polling results and to steer clear of all betting apps or betting on political outcomes. But I just think that it's pretty interesting to see that the indicators are that there's a decent number of undecided or open-minded Canadian voters that could see themselves giving the Liberals another mandate. I don't think they're going to win in Alberta. I think it's going to be a shutout in Alberta. I think it might be a shutout across the prairies, but you never know. It could be a closely fought election.
Yeah, I'm more likely to think that a Liberal voter will continue to vote Liberal if leadership is changed and they agree with them than if they're going to flip and go right to the other side, especially with someone as, I'll just say it, he's polarizing, Pierre Poilievre. I agree with you. I think if Carney, and somebody in here just said, Carney has international experience and is a greatly admired economist. I agree. That's what I was trying to say. But using the word banker is just like this no-no. But I agree. I think that they're more likely to stay the course with the party they've been voting for if the leadership looks better.
On Danielle Smith and the alleged scandal, Dominic is watching us live on X this morning. Thanks to those of you that catch Real Talk live on X and all of our other social media platforms. That's presented by California Closets. Dominic says, listen, if this thing is tied to Smith's former chief of staff, Marshall Smith, I'm not sure that she can avoid blame here. Sean, taking issue with the comparison of this potentially to Alison Redford, says, are you kidding, Jespo? Says Redford took her family on a government trip. Big deal. Maybe 20 grand. Well, I don't know. Well, whatever. I can fact check that in a second. But he says we're talking about skimming potentially hundreds of millions of dollars here. Says this is Trumpish. That from Sean. I mean, the thing with Redford, the trip you're talking about, maybe in particular, Nelson Mandela's funeral, people were pissed off about that. She had to pay that back. I think that was like 50 grand. But the flight manifest, there was that. And then there was the Sky Palace. I don't actually even think, I've said this before, I know not everybody loves this opinion. I mean, it's called the Sky Palace by the opposition. It was never actually called the Sky Palace.
Sounds like
obviously
a great nightclub. I'd love to go.
But I don't necessarily think that it's entirely ridiculous that Alberta would have a residence for its premier on the legislature grounds or near the legislature grounds that could be used for entertaining international diplomats and the like. I don't think that there's anything particularly crazy about that. I think it's the fact that the premier was influencing the design of it, and it's sort of like trying to have it custom designed
bedrooms
for her and her daughter,
family,
bedrooms and the whole 9 yards. It's just a tough look. It's a tough look. I think you could justify the residence, but you can't have the premier calling the shots on the interior design, right? So it's more the spirit. Like I think that's what Don Braid's getting at in invoking the example is like it's Albertans believing that they've lost all trust. And if this proves to be the case here, then that certainly would be comparable. Albertans losing trust in the process. Albertans losing faith in the accountability and the transparency of the government. It's a big thing that Smith has demanded from the feds, and it would be no wonder that Albertans would demand the same thing from her, right? So Donovan says, yeah, I mean, things do need to be looked at. Obviously, he says an inquiry is justified here, but how much can we expect the premier to know the details of every single thing? Her focus has been on the U.S., on Albertan oil and gas. When in the context of her for taking a day or two to get the right response to this is okay, fine by me, says Donovan, who's not particularly troubled that the premier took a couple of days to speak on this. Jillian, by the way, noted that she also had Justin Trudeau when he was dropping off his checks for the media, talking about her Senate appointment. She says he also made a check drop off for her recently, right to her school where she's teaching. Says she received her check for brainwashing students to vote Liberal through secret codes in algebra homework.
Ooh, yeah.
So, yeah, very good stuff there. Cactus says Trump, in talking about Canada as the 51st state, it is absolutely not a joke. A world leader threatening the sovereignty of another nation. He should be not allowed into the G7. He's a hostile leader. Interesting comments there. Sharon's watching us live on Facebook this morning. What's up, Sharon? Says, considering the state that Alberta's healthcare system is in right now, this story represents blatant stealing from the people of Alberta. Sharon says people need to be fired and jailed. I don't know if anybody's getting jailed yet, but I do think this is a story, to say the very least, that we're going to be keeping an eye on. And you can always send us your thoughts on this. If there's a guest you'd love to hear on Real Talk as well, send us an email to talk@ryanjespersen.com. And we sure appreciate those of you that leave a comment on our YouTube episodes. Yeah. We do our best to reply to every single comment we can.
And hit that flamethrower. We know it's going to be full of people commenting on this very first show of the week, probably. And I can already see a few comments. Lock her up. Let's not say that.
Ken says, Ken says, if found to be true, there's no way that Marshall Smith, former chief of staff, would be pushing Alberta Health Services on contracts without Premier Smith's direction. I think it would be pretty difficult for any political leader to suggest that they were totally unaware of what their chief of staff was up to. I think that the comment, though, that I just read in particular was relating to the amount of time that had passed between Carrie Tate's story breaking in the Globe and the Premier making a statement by way of X. That's, of course, the statement that we shared with you a little bit earlier in this episode. I want to thank those of you that are joining us. Before we get to positive reflections, and this is kind of a local one this week, kind of a local, what do we want to call it, a bucket filler. This is one that made our day over the weekend. That's coming up in just a quick second. But first, I wanted to put North Road Investment Council on your radar. Marshall McAllister is the president over at North Road, joined us last week on the show. You can find that, the highlight from that interview, as well as the full episode on our YouTube channel, talking about basically Trump's tariffs and what they would do to the Canadian economy, what the market is telling us about the impact of Trump's trade policy, and of course, what he sees the Canadian dollar doing over the next little bit. Really great insights from Marshall. Encourage you to check that out. Now that we're in a new calendar year, North Road Investment Council also wants to remind you can add to your registered accounts, and this year that includes an additional $7,000 on your TFSA, so a combined total contribution room of $102,000 for adults since 2009. But the question is, what type of investment should you put in your TFSA? If you're a taxable investor, the choice of which investments to place in your TFSA and which investments to place in your other registered or non-registered accounts can have a huge effect on your after-tax portfolio success. North Road Investment Council welcomes the opportunity to speak to you on how to reduce the taxes that you're paying on your investments. You know, investing is not simple. Don't go it alone. Contact North Road through their website at northroadic.com, and you can always find North Road Investment Council on the sponsors tab on our website at ryanjespersen.com. We've got a message here from someone involved in Alberta Health Services, and we have verified their identity, which we won't share for obvious reasons, but they say it would be worthwhile for Real Talkers to know that this Alberta Surgical Group, they say, Ryan, that you were referencing earlier, these private surgical facilities, says it's part owned by an orthosurgeon and an anesthetist, and many orthosurgeons are performing hip and knee replacements there for the less medically complex patients. They say, for example, at the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Edmonton, in central Edmonton, not far from our studio, as a matter of fact, they say there are approximately 15 ORs, 15 operating rooms in total. So Monday to Friday, those ORs are running from 7 in the morning till 5, sometimes after 5, sometimes on weekends. All but one of them are open. They say that the one that they may keep open would be for urgent cases, like urgent surgeries. They'd have one surgical suite available. All others would be utilized essentially from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. and sometimes after than that. They say after 10 p.m. it basically has to be a life-threatening injury before you could take a patient to the OR. So this is especially significant, to state the obvious, maybe when you're talking about surgical wait times and wait lists, the limitations that are being placed on surgeries right now in the capital city. This person says this is important because if these ORs could be staffed, and that would have to be anesthesia, it would have to be nurses and everybody else past 5 p.m. and on weekends, then we wouldn't need a private surgical facility like ASG. Says, meantime, they won't pay for people like surgeons, like professionals here who look after ortho patients pre and post surgery for a safer patient to physician ratio. They say, hence the shutdown of the 56-bed ortho surgical center that's at the Royal Alexandra Hospital. So that's another interesting point to make, a little bit of background information, the justification, the reason why that's most significant, the justification around these private surgical facilities taking or shouldering some of the load, shouldering some of the burden, taking some of the spillage or the overlap, trying to cut down on wait times, trying to process and complete as many surgeries as possible in the province of Alberta. They're saying there's tangible steps, this professional says, that could be taken at surgical centers, including at the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Edmonton, that would eliminate the need, or at least decrease the need or the justification for these private surgical facilities. So that's an interesting point as well from somebody in the know, somebody that we can verify does work within the healthcare system. If you have insights like that you would be willing to share with this show so we can deepen and broaden our understanding and our commentary on stories that matter to this audience, you know where to find us. Now, every week, our very first episode of every week, we have an opportunity, courtesy of our friends at Kuby Renewable Energy, to shine the light on something or tell you about a story that has brightened our day, that has brightened our week, or maybe the week of somebody that listens to this show. It's Positive Reflections presented by our friends at Kuby Renewable Energy. And Johnny, I'm getting personal on this one. It was a huge honor over the weekend for me to be invited to attend Raise the Raft. We were talking to you a little bit about this last week. I'm just going to show you my Instagram story right now. This is video that I shot at the Edmonton Convention Center over the weekend. I want to give a huge shout out to Elements Day Spa in Leduc. They're the ones that cooked up this plan and executed it flawlessly, bringing out hundreds of people in support of Jasper Raft Tours. Remember we talked to you about this in My Jasper Memories last week? Jasper Raft Tours, one of the many, many businesses that was impacted obviously by that Jasper wildfire. Johnny, they were telling us almost 20 of their rafts were completely destroyed in the fire. Not just that, but a lot of their infrastructure as well, their trailers, their equipment, the oars, the life jackets, all the stuff you don't think of. Well, the community came together at the Edmonton Convention Center over the weekend, raising a ton of dough for Jasper Raft Tours, and we are so proud of everybody that was out there and that did an amazing job raising money for such an important cause. I had a chance to talk to the business owners themselves, and they were absolutely moved by this. It turns out the team at Elements Day Spa that put this event on, and they got the DJs together, and they got the catering done, and they had the entertainers there. We had burlesque performers and acrobats. The Brass Tactics were there. DJ Quake was there spinning. It turns out that the organizers, they're just fans of the business. They go on Jasper Raft Tours on the Athabasca River in the summers themselves, and they said they wanted to do everything they could. Like, they have not been personal friends with this family for years and years and years. It's nothing like that. They just saw an area they could help. They decided to do something about it, and at the end of the day, hundreds of people gathered in support of a wonderful cause. It was amazing to be able to connect with so many Jasperites who had made the trip in on Highway 16 from Jasper to Edmonton to attend the event itself, and to see people amid great adversity gathering together, laughing, maybe for the first time in a while, and reminding each other or being reminded about the power of community. I had somebody come up to me at one point, and there was a guy helping somebody else with something off to the side, and they were helping with the logistics of the event, and they said, you want to know what? They said, that guy right there, that guy that's doing the heavy lifting over there helping with this event, they said he lost his home, he lost his business. They pointed to somebody else. They said, that guy right there, he works, he's a team member for Jasper Raft Tours. They were using their vans, their raft tour vans, to help people evacuate. Wow. They said, that guy right there, that guy was driving the evacuation van, didn't even go back to his house, didn't save a single thing because he was doing everything he could to get everybody else evacuated.
It's amazing.
They said these are the types of people that we're doing this event for, and I honestly have to say it's one of the most powerful nights that I've been witness to in a long time. I want to give a shout out to the organizers, a shout out to everybody that was there contributing and helping raise funds for such an important cause. It's just a reminder again of the value of friendship, the value of community, the value of family businesses, of legacy, everything we talk about on the show put into practice on Saturday night at the Edmonton Convention Center as part of that Raise the Raft fundraiser. You can find Jasper Raft Tours, by the way, online. Encourage you to, they're taking bookings. They've got their new rafts booked. They've got them ordered. They're expecting them to arrive in the next month or so, and they say we will be back on the river this summer. You can learn more, of course, by checking out jasper.travel. Check out our last Wednesday episode for My Jasper Memories for more details. And a shout out to everybody that's doing similar things in your neck of the woods, in your community, to help people get back on their feet. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Positive Reflections is proudly presented by Kuby Renewable Energy. You can get a free solar quote today by visiting kuby.ca. We'll be back at it in less than 24 hours with more of the stories that matter most to you, and a big part of us knowing what those are is you being in touch with us. Thanks for leaving comments. Thanks for subscribing to us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And thanks for telling your friends about what's happening right here on Real Talk.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harmon Candola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.